Hi, my name is Chris Jackson. I am a business attorney. Today I'm going to answer a question I often get from my clients and also my YouTube followers, and that is, hey, how do I take my existing LLC and put it underneath a holding company LLC? And I'm going to answer that question in a step-by-step walkthrough starting right now. All right, my dog Jax is a big fan of holding company structures, so he wanted to make a quick appearance. Jaxie, say hi. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know I'm a big fan of the whiteboard for certain types of presentations of information. I think this one applies here. Question is, how do you put your existing LLC underneath a new holding company LLC? I'm going to go through that process step by step. It's important that you watch till the end because there are a lot of overlooked steps in this process that could be detrimental to you and your LLC and your new structure. I want to make sure you have a clear roadmap and everything's covered. So please watch till the end. But here we go. This is your current LLC structure. I presume you either have a single member or a multi-member LLC, and this is the operating LLC, and you want to put this operating LLC underneath a holding company and add some additional layers of protection. So at the end of these steps, you're going to have this structure here. You will be the members of the holding LLC, and the holding LLC will be the single member of what's now the subsidiary LLC. So you, as the members up here, used to be the members of this LLC, but you're putting this extra LLC in between you and the existing LLC, and that is for asset protection purposes, organizational purposes, anonymity in many cases. I'm not going to go into all of the benefits of the holding company structure. I have another video that goes into all of those benefits, and I encourage you to watch it. I'll put a link to that underneath this video. I'm just going to show you the steps it will take to put your subsidiary LLC or existing LLC underneath the holding company as discussed. All right, so we're going to go through the steps to take to achieve the holding company structure above, but just a word of caution really quickly. If your subsidiary LLC or existing LLC is a real estate LLC, say it has a rental property, that rental property is owned by the LLC, and the ownership of that rental property is not going to change. However, the ownership of the LLC that owns the rental property is going to change in the sense that you, the members, will no longer own the LLC that owns the rental property. Holding company LLC, holding LLC will own the subsidiary LLC, and then you're going to be moved up one layer above. That should not be an issue. However, I caution you, you should reach out to your bank if you have a mortgage on this property. Let them know there's going to be a change in control in the sense that you're going to put a new LLC in between your subsidiary LLC and you as members. It's something you should notify the bank about just to make sure it's not going to trigger a due on sale clause in your mortgage documents. Okay, step number one is to form the holding company. Question is, where do you form it? You can do it in your existing state where your existing LLC is if you like. I personally prefer Wyoming. I've talked about this in other videos. I'm not going to go into much detail. Wyoming's my first choice. Delaware is my second choice. Nevada's my third choice. Nevada's too expensive in terms of fees, in my view. I would only form it in Nevada if you actually live in Nevada. Delaware also has higher fees. In my view, Wyoming is the best in terms of asset protection, fees, anonymity, etc. I have a video on how to form an LLC in Wyoming. I also have one in Delaware. If you want to form it in Nevada or in other states, I have videos in other states as well. Principles are pretty much the same, and I'll put a link to those videos underneath this video. Just make sure that when you are forming this new LLC, this holding LLC, that you use the exact same members in the existing LLC. If it's a single member, then use that same single member in the holding LLC. Or if you have a multi-member LLC, put both those same members as members of the holding LLC. And if you have multiple members, you want to make sure that the percentage ownership is exactly the same as your current LLC. Reasons you want to do that are for tax purposes, and I cannot give tax advice, but that is a way, generally speaking, and I encourage you to run all this by your CPA or tax advisor, but generally speaking, that is the way to make this a tax-free transaction. Okay, step two is to enter into a contribution agreement. This contribution agreement is essentially between you, the member or members of the existing subsidiary LLC, and the holding company LLC, the three parties. And in that contribution agreement, you're essentially taking the membership interest you own in the existing subsidiary LLC, contributing it to the holding company LLC, so that the holding company LLC, the holding LLC, will now own the subsidiary LLC. And the end result of that is this right here. you guys will be members, or you will be a member of the Holding LLC, and the Holding LLC will be the sole member of the Subsidiary LLC. If you're worried about where to get a contribution agreement, you can ask your attorney for it. I also have legal templates, including a contribution agreement designed exactly for this purpose, both for a single member LLC and a multi-member LLC. It is not a substitute for legal advice. It is just a template. It does not take into your account your specific state or anything like that, but I have that available. I will put a link to my legal templates website underneath this video. Now, essentially, these first two steps are important steps to create the holding company structure with your existing LLC. But what you really need to do in these other steps is clean up some items. First and foremost, you have to amend your operating agreement of the existing original subsidiary LLC to reflect that the new member and sole member of that LLC is no longer you, the member, or you, the members. It is now the holding company LLC. The language that I have in the template contribution agreement covers this, but essentially you're going to amend and restate your operating agreement of your existing subsidiary LLC to reflect that the new member is the holding LLC. One thing I wanted to just point out, there's no need to change the purpose. I get this question a lot. You don't have to, when you create a holding company structure, you don't have to indicate that there's a holding company relationship in the purpose in either the holding LLC or the subsidiary LLC when you have a holding company structure. I generally have a general purpose that the LLC can essentially do whatever the law allows it to do. I don't have a specific purpose. I don't mention that one is a subsidiary and one's a holding company. There's no reason to make a change to that purpose in my view. I also have legal template operating agreements if those are of interest to you. But I just want to address that question. No need to change the purpose. The only thing you need to change is who are the members of each entity. All right, step 4 is state filings. Now, most states don't require you to file an amended articles of organization or certificate of formation, depending upon your state. So there are some states where they will reference who the member is in the document filed with the state to form the LLC, which is usually referred to as the articles of organization. But even if that is the case, you do not often have to file an amended articles of organization to change who the member is of the subsidiary LLC. It's really state dependent. However, many states, in fact, most states require an annual report. And sometimes in those annual reports, you have to indicate who is the member of the LLC. So with respect to your existing subsidiary LLC, if you file an annual report, you're going to have to reflect that the holding LLC is the new member of the subsidiary LLC. All right, step 5 has some often overlooked steps. Number 1 is whether you need to notify your bank. It really depends upon your bank, but it cannot hurt to let your bank know that you now have the holding LLC as the member of the subsidiary LLC, and that of course you are the member or members of the holding LLC. Should not be a problem with your bank because essentially the ownership is still the same. You just have another layer of protection, but it is prudent to let your bank know. And I should also say your holding LLC should have a separate bank account from your subsidiary LLC. The subsidiary LLC is the operating LLC. It should be conducting all the activity, revenue goes into that LLC bank account, expenses come out of that LLC bank account. The holding LLC really is there to receive distributions from the operating LLC, receive those distributions, and then make distributions to members. If capital contributions have to come in, they should come in through the holding LLC and then down to the subsidiary LLC. The bank account for the holding LLC should therefore be set up. And if you watch my video on how to set up an LLC, getting the EIN and opening the bank account and doing all those things that you need to make all this happen, I cover that in those videos. Secondly, it's really important that if you have insurance on the subsidiary LLC, presumably that insurance is going to cover the LLC itself and its operations, and maybe you, the member or members, as additionally insured. Since you are removing yourself as members of the subsidiary LLC and you're making the holding LLC the sole member of the subsidiary LLC, you really should have that insurance coverage now include the holding LLC and you as members if possible. But certainly you need to notify your insurance company right away to make sure that your insurance is in place and it's covering the proper parties. You should also let your CPA know in advance what you're doing and remind your CPA that your tax returns are going to change in the sense that the member or members of the subsidiary LLC is now the holding LLC, and you are the member or members of the holding LLC. All right, a really important question is, what do I do about the holding company LLC? I just set up this holding LLC. Do I have to register or qualify that holding LLC, say in the state in which I, the member, reside, or where the subsidiary LLC is? And if you're in Wyoming, for example, or Delaware or Nevada, for asset protection purposes, and because they have very favorable laws to protect the assets of the members of the LLC, you want to be careful about registering that LLC in your state. This is a state to state question. I cannot give legal advice or tax advice, but I generally recommend to my clients that if they want to retain the protection, say, of a Wyoming LLC, and they want Wyoming law to apply, hopefully, if there are any lawsuits, that they should not avail that Wyoming LLC to the laws of other states. Let's say, for example, California, if they can avoid it. Now, California may say, well, the member or members reside in California, and that alone would require the Wyoming LLC to qualify or register in California. I would disagree with that. Wyoming LLC is not active in California. It's just a holding company. It doesn't have any activity other than to receive distributions out and capital contributions in. And it's just basically an intermediary between you, the members, and the actual LLC that's operating. So, again, that is not legal advice. Seek your own legal advice or tax advice. But if you're going to form an LLC in a jurisdiction that is favorable to protecting the assets of its members, or protecting, for example, the LLC's assets from the liabilities of the members, then you want to be careful about registering or qualifying that holding LLC in another state. It will add to the expenses, and it will increase the likelihood that that state's law will apply rather than, say, Wyoming law. Now, there may be some penalties if your state disagrees, and you got to look into this yourself. That is just a general principle that I go by, but don't listen to me on that. Seek your own advice. Okay, so as a recap, what you need to do to put your existing LLC underneath a holding company LLC is, number one, form the holding company LLC. I recommend Wyoming generally, or Delaware, or maybe Nevada. Wyoming is my first choice for many reasons, and I've discussed that in other videos. You want to form that Wyoming LLC with the exact same members as the existing LLC, what's going to be the subsidiary LLC, and the same percentage ownership for tax purposes. Number two, you enter into a contribution agreement where you're contributing as members of the existing LLC, your membership interest to the holding LLC. Number three, you amend the operating agreement of the subsidiary LLC to reflect that the holding LLC is now the new member of the subsidiary LLC. You want to also make sure that you make the proper state filings. You notify your bank, you notify your insurance company to make sure your insurance coverage is proper, and that's it.